Hello, Joshua. Thank you very much for coming to the Needham Channel today and talk about your candidacy. We are going to go through a lot of stuff. But first, I want to talk about, because you're currently on the Finance Committee, and you were the chair of the committee last year. And can you tell me a little bit about your experience on the Finance Committee? How do you evaluate different town projects and initiatives during the budgeting process?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Yisha. It's great to be here. On the Finance Committee, what we do is we look at every proposal or budget item that has any budgetary impact on the residents. And so that involves the budget itself. So that this coming year in fiscal year 2024 is going to be about $214 million. And so we look line by line in every department, understanding the existing operations as well as new operations. So these are proposed additions to the budget, new programs, new personnel. And then we also look at warrant articles that have financial impacts. Those can be particular articles that have expenditures attached to them. They can also be articles like zoning, which may not have a dollar impact for appropriation, but may have impacts in other ways. So we look at all of these types of proposals, all of these types of expenditure requests, and we really try to understand the need for them, and then also understand how they're going to be implemented. So we want to be able to effectively use the taxpayers' dollars and give back to residents in the form of services.
When you're evaluating those projects, like what criteria do you use?
So it's in terms of cost benefit mainly. So what is the cost to taxpayers of the program, and what is the benefit to taxpayers of running the program? Those are the main things. It's always dollars and cents for us.
Mm-hmm. And now you think you're ready for select board?
Yes, so I have a very firm understanding of the operations and finances of the town from being a part of the Finance Committee and the chair this past year. I've also been a town meeting member for 12 years. So I really understand how things work in the town and what works well and what can be improved. I really want to bring that expertise to the select board in setting policy for the town.
Mm-hmm. And what do you see as the most challenging issues facing the town right now, and how do you propose addressing them?
So housing is one. It's not a challenge that's just affecting Needham. It also affects the rest of the state and the country. I think in Needham especially, there's high demand and there's not enough supply. So we want to keep the high demand. Needham's a great place to be. And we want people to continue to want to come to Needham. We need to increase the supply in some ways. So I think the MBTA zoning proposals that requires additional housing be allowed within a half mile of train stations in town is a great way to increase housing. I think there are definitely other ways that we can help with housing as well in that area. Another area that I think is really important is street safety. So we've had some tragic and fatal accidents in the past couple of years. Being able to improve street safety, not just in terms of the roads, but also the sidewalks, the crosswalks, the bike lanes, is really important. That's a quality of life issue for residents. We need to feel safe as we walk and bike and drive on the roads. And then lastly, I think a really important issue for the town is understanding infrastructure. So we have two main buildings that haven't been done yet, the Mitchell School and the Pollard School. Mitchell is 74 years old. That has to be redone so that it's up to the same standards as the other schools in town. Pollard also needs to be looked at. That when I was there at Pollard, it wasn't in great shape. And several years have passed since then. So we need to really rehab it and in some places reconstruct a new building in that place. But in addition to new buildings, we really need to start looking at maintenance and being, I think, very aggressive in how we maintain our buildings, our roads, our water and sewer infrastructure, because if we can maintain that infrastructure over time, I think it's going to be a lot less expensive than having to replace it. And in fact, by maintaining, we can defer some of those replacement costs later on. I think we need to put funding for maintenance in certain places. So sidewalks in particular, we did an inventory a couple of years ago that looks at all the sidewalks we have in town. At the current rate, it would take about 40 years to bring the quality of sidewalks up to standards, up to ADA compliance standards. And I think that's too long. So I think we need to reinvest in those sidewalks and make sure that those are maintained and are in a state that people can use safely.
Talking about the two major school buildings project, just to provide some context here, that these two projects are going to require a significant amount of funding. And I think depending on how much financial assistance we can receive from the state, there is a possibility that Needham might need to raise the debt ceiling to afford these two projects, and also High Rock too. How do you approach the challenge of like balancing the needs to fund those projects, but at the same time the need to avoid excessive tax burdens on residents?
Yeah, so both projects combined, the Mitchell, Pollard, and then High Rock, as you mentioned, would cost, based on current estimates, about $300 million, and that would exceed our debt limits. So we need to think hard about how we finance those. Do we finance them all at once? Do we spread the costs out over time so that there's more time to pay off that debt? It looks like for reimbursement, as you mentioned, the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, may reimburse based upon historical reimbursement rates between 20 and 30% of costs, so not all of it certainly. So we need to be in a position to pay for the majority of those costs. We need to work with all stakeholders, so the Finance Committee, the School Committee, the Select Board really needs to work and see what size of the buildings we should be using. So, for instance, at Mitchell, the preferred option that the school committee has proposed is a 3-section school, whereas the current size is a 4-section school. So it would be smaller, and the proposal is to, in the end, turn High Rock into a 6th elementary school. So understanding the operating costs and the capital costs of that program compared to a program where we keep Mitchell at a 4-section school, which is the current size, I think that's a discussion we can have.
How do you think the town could work to identify some of the additional sources of revenue or cost savings to support these projects?
So in terms of revenue sources, the main revenue source to the town is tax base. So that's property taxes from residents, also property taxes from businesses. So what we do is we have a 2.5% limit that the taxes can be raised every year. That's Proposition 2.5, a state law. On top of that, there's new growth. New growth is new physical infrastructure. So if you build an addition on your house, that's taxed above and beyond the 2.5%. If new businesses come in, that's taxed above and beyond the 2.5%. So encouraging businesses to come to town to grow is something that's really helpful. We need to be, again, very cautious and very careful with how we grow, because we don't want to overburden the town with so much growth that residents feel that they're being pushed out. We really want to balance the needs of the residents as well as the needs of the businesses. And in that way, I think we can have the tax revenues that we need to do these projects, and we can also make sure that the residents aren't overburdened.
Going back to housing, what do you think is the most pressing unmet housing needs in Needham?
For me, what I look at is the teardowns of small starter homes. So I live in a starter home. I'm lucky enough to live in a starter home because when I bought in Needham, I don't think I could have afforded to live in a bigger home. Those starter homes are a great, attractive option for people who are especially younger coming to town. So when a starter home is torn down, we're not replacing it. And I think that is something that we really need to be able to address, to be able to incentivize builders to build those starter homes again. And that will likely have to involve some zoning changes. But I think it's worth looking at because we need a diversity of housing in terms of size, in terms of whether it's single family or multifamily. I think the diversity of housing is going to lead to a diversity of the people who live in town. And that's good. We want that.
Is there any specific strategies and potential solutions that you're proposing?
Yeah. So for starter homes, the idea is, and these are just numbers for discussion purposes, these have to be discussed, in public meetings and, with people to iron out all the details. But right now we have a single family lot minimum of 10,000 square feet. And if you have a lot of 15,000 square feet, for instance, it's too small for 2 lots, but it's bigger than a minimum 1 lot. if you can create zoning to allow for 2 small houses to be built on that 15,000 square foot property, and small, I'm thinking about 1,500 square feet each, you can allow, you can create an incentive for those 2 houses to be built where in aggregate the 2 houses are worth more than 1 large house, both to the developer and to the town. And so that can be an incentive and be a policy that can bring those small houses back to town.
I went to your website. There was something that I found very interesting is you talked about environmental safety and PFAS.
Well, it's a big concern for many of our neighboring communities. So the towns of Wayland and Natick in particular had PFAS levels in recent years, really last 2 years, that were above safety levels. It caused people to have to use bottled water. The harm of PFAS is that they're so-called forever chemicals. They're very hard to get rid of, and they have hormonal altering effects. So they have health implications as well. Our water in Needham comes from 2 sources. So we have well water and we have MWRA water. That's the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority. So our well water does have some PFAS in it, but when we take the MWRA water, it dilutes it and makes it below the safety limit. So our water is safe. We need to make sure that it continues to be safe, and we need to identify any sources of PFAS that are going into our water system. Because if we can reduce or eliminate that, then we can make it healthier for our bodies, health-wise, but also for the environment. If our water quality is poor, it has knock-on effects all throughout the environment.
When it comes to climate change and environmental safety issues, those are broader issues. Sometimes it might not get enough attention at local level. So how would you approach the challenge of bringing awareness of a broader community in Needham to those broader issues?
So awareness is just about communication. I think it applies, certainly to the PFAS contamination, but it applies to everything. Being able to make people aware of things that are going on in town, not just end results of decisions that are made, but also when residents can have an opportunity to offer their own input. People love being able to share their own experiences, and they want that opportunity. They also want to understand the decision-making process, so how boards and committees arrive at the decisions that they do. So being able to communicate through newsletters, we have the News You Needham, but also through office hours or drop-in sessions, being able to just be approachable and call a select person or email or show up at a meeting. I think it's really important to have that communication and dialogue with residents.
Then talking about communication, another the topic that on your website I find pretty interesting is you specifically mentioned the executive session during the select board meeting. So just to provide some context here, select board held a meeting every other week, and those are open meeting. Everyone can go see, watch, and listen, and Needham Channel is also broadcasting them. But the executive session is where select board discussing confidential issues. Why does this draw special attention to you?
So the Finance Committee has also met an executive session because you're right, there are some things that are sensitive that do require that extra level of confidentiality. But state law requires that those minutes be released as soon as that need ends. And so, and the Finance Committee actually did that with regards to the Foster property, or also called the Castle Farm property. We met in executive session last year, and then we released the minutes earlier, in 2022. And so I think it's important to be able to review executive session minutes on a periodic basis to see if there's any material that can be released, because it's not meant to be confidential indefinitely. I think that residents really want to know what's going on in town. They want to know the decision-making process and how their representatives arrive at certain decisions. So that's one area of transparency that I think is important. Other areas of transparency is really just communicating information. So it's really about letting people know what's going on and when things are happening. So, I get questions all the time, what's happening, with, a property next door that's been knocked down? Is something going in there? Or they want to know, why are my taxes rising? So they're people have questions about all sorts of things. So I love answering those types of questions. I really like getting into the details and even doing research if I have to get an answer. So it's for me, it's enjoyable. I really like that type of constituent service.
Now, can you talk a little bit about your life in addition to your involvement in town governance?
Absolutely. So I'm Josh Levy. I grew up in Needham. I went to Needham Public Schools. And professionally, I do healthcare consulting, where I look at forecasting for patient-based models, modeling for various aspects, understanding how patients get access to medications, how physicians are prescribing medications. So it's very detailed and very quantitative. And I've brought that expertise in my work with the town. Now my wife and I are raising our nearly two-year-old son in Needham.
And lastly, what kind of unique qualities that you think you can bring to the table as a select board candidate?
Oh, I think that I'm detail-oriented. I really like getting into the nitty-gritties of an issue, and I have an inquisitive eye. I think that I have maybe a reputation for asking probing questions, being able to get at the heart of an issue or understanding the impact to residents, both pro and con. I think that I am really good at interacting with residents, answering their questions. I'm very approachable in that respect. And then I think I also have a passion for it. I really enjoy doing this type of work, and I think being a member of the select board requires that. So I hope people can see that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So thank you, Joshua, very much for coming in and talking to me today. And I wish you good luck on April 11th.
Thank you very much, Yusha.